Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. Today I wanted to talk about the 5 JRPGs that mean the most to me, like emotionally, right? So this isn't necessarily my 5 favorite JRPGs, although you could make an argument for some of them at least, being on my favorite list as well. But these are games that maybe they came about in a particularly important time in my life, or I was going through something difficult and the game helped me through it, or it helped me realize something about myself or about the world around me, that sort of stuff. I would absolutely love to hear some examples of games that are meaningful to you in a similar way down in the comments. Let's have a conversation. I look forward to that every time I put a video out. So thanks for engaging with me down there. I really appreciate it. Anyway, without further ado, I just want to get into it. Let's just get into it. All right, first game on my list has got to be, it really just has to be, Final Fantasy II. That's right, I said 2. Yes, this was Final Fantasy II. In North America, this was released on the Super Nintendo. I don't remember the year. Was it 92, 93? I could look it up. I'm not gonna. But yeah, I mean, this game came out when I was just a lad. And I think I've said before on this channel that technically speaking, my first JRPG was Dragon Quest, or Dragon Warrior, as I knew it until I was in my 20s at least. So Dragon Quest was the game that Nintendo had such a surplus of that they just sent out free copies to kids all across America. They're like, please, you got to take these off our hands. We're dying here. Help us out. And I don't know, I assume that they hoped it would jumpstart the JRPG revolution in America like it had in Japan. I don't think that really happened. I mean, obviously the Dragon Quest games are amazing, but I think you can look around and say that JRPGs are not as big of a thing here as they are in Japan. That's always been the case. It probably will always be the case. There are a few series and games that are an exception. I feel like nowadays Final Fantasy tends to do better in the West than it does in Japan. But, just a few exceptions here and there. JRPGs are still largely the purview of Japan. But Dragon Quest, was my introduction to the genre, to the style of game that is the JRPG. And after that, I dabbled, right, a little bit here and there in JRPGs, but there weren't a ton, right? There just weren't a ton. There were games that were sort of adjacent, Crystallis on the NES, and, other games that are Zelda-like action-adventure, but nothing that did quite the exact same thing. I never owned the original Final Fantasy for the NES. I played it briefly at a friend's house, or I don't even remember if I actually played it myself. I may have just watched him, but I never actually owned the original Final Fantasy as a kid. So I didn't get to experience that, but I was familiar with it. I knew the sort of game it was. I knew it was like that Dragon Quest. So when I was in, I think it was Toys R Us one afternoon with my mom and my grandma, I want to say. Yeah, probably both of them. By the video game section, here was this red box that said Final Fantasy II. I was like, hey, that's the thing that I think I like. I want that. And they just bought it for me. I don't know. They did this to me. The reason that there's this channel that you're watching right now is because they were like, yeah, sure, you can have this game, I guess. I don't think it was a special occasion. They were just very generous, and they loved making me happy, and I just get warm feelings when I think about the two of them buying games for me, just indulging me in this hobby, and before it was really a hobby when I was just a kid. And anyway, so Final Fantasy II, I remember being in the back seat of the car on the way home, reading the instruction manual, because I could do that back in the day without hurling my guts out like would happen now, because I cannot. Don't ask me to read in the car. Don't show me your phone in the car. It's good. It'll be bad. But I'm reading the manual, and in the back of the manual, there's like a mini walkthrough of the first, hour, 2 hours of the game. And I'm reading through it, and I remember there was a part where Cecil and Kain, they go into the Cave of Mist at the very beginning of the game, and the manual said, a voice said halt or stop or something. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it said. But in my little kid mind, I thought that meant that there was speaking, that there was like voiced dialogue in the game somehow in the early 90s on the Super Nintendo. And, you know, I had seen the Super Nintendo do some crazy things. So I was not shocked that that would be possible. And I was super excited. I was like, wow, they're going to talk. For the first time in a video game, they're going to talk. That's so cool. And quickly learned that that was not the case. And I don't remember feeling any disappointment about that. I was just like, okay, I was incorrect. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just brings back such warm memories. And I think it's important to me, not just because of those memories, but because of the love of the genre that it really instilled in me. I think that I could have gotten to the same place down a few different roads. I could have purchased all of the Dragon Quest games, the first 4 as they came out in North America, and gotten hooked that way. Were there others? I don't know. Maybe there weren't. Maybe that's the only other path I could have taken. I don't know. But this is the path I took to get hooked on this genre of game, and I'm really grateful that that happened. What do we have next? Oh, let's do this. Let's do Shining Force, the original Shining Force for the Sega Genesis. I think I've mentioned this before, but strategy role-playing has not ever really been my thing. Like, there are some strategy role-playing games I play. I do enjoy some of them. Like, I had fun with Tactics Ogre Reborn. I plan to play Triangle Strategy. You know, I want to get more into the genre now as an adult. As a kid, it felt very intimidating to me. I tried Final Fantasy Tactics when it came out, and I just hit a brick wall with that game. I could not advance past a certain point, and grinding was not in my vocabulary back then. Like, if a game stopped me like that, I would hit my head against that brick wall a few times, and then I would just give up and walk away. So that's what happened with Final Fantasy Tactics, and that kind of soured me for tactical strategy role-playing games for a long time. I know now that I could beat that game. I'm sure that I could. And, you know, grinding is not as big of a deal to me as an adult, especially with like handheld consoles and the ability to kind of turn your brain off a little bit and do grinding while you're watching TV or doing something else. So I could go back and play those games. Anyway, all that to say, Shining Force was kind of the rare gem that was a strategy role-playing game, and I recognized it as that, but it worked for me. And that could be because it's easier, which I think it kind of is. It's not Final Fantasy Tactics or Ogre Battle level of difficulty, but it had more than just a bit easier gameplay going for it. Right? Like, it's got an interesting world, pretty basic story, which for the time, kind of par for the course, but just super colorful characters, a whole variety of characters. You've got centaurs and flying dudes and mages and warriors and gnomes and healers and just all sorts of cool stuff. And the battles were super cool because you would engage with your enemies on a map, kind of like most tactical role-playing games, but when you went to attack, or if the enemy attacked you, it switched to this sort of pseudo 3D over-the-shoulder view of the character where they would attack the enemy. It's just like so cool for a 16-bit, like, for the era that this came out in. So freaking cool, like cinematic stuff, right? We had not seen this before. This was intense. Why is this game important to me? Well, to me, and I don't know if he would really remember this because he was quite a bit younger, but my younger brother, he's 6 years younger than me, which when you're 40 and your brother's 34, that's nothing. But when you're 11 and your brother's 5, that's a big gap, right? Like, it's difficult to bond with somebody when they're that young and you are starting to develop your preteen adolescent brain, right? But I felt like this game was something that my brother and I really bonded over. Like, we would play this game. I say we, I would play it and he would, sit there because I was the older brother and I'm not going to voluntarily hand over the controller. That'd be crazy. But I would sit there and play and he would be there and he would get enthusiastic and excited about what was happening on the screen, and that would make it more fun for me. And, my brother and I developed a really good friendship over the years as we got older. And I think a lot of the foundation for that and for our shared love of role-playing games in general is because of Shining Force. And so to me, it's just a really special game for kind of helping to establish that bond with somebody who's really important to me. So, all right. I guess we're almost kind of going chronologically here. Should I keep that up? Next up, we have Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Lufia 1 was a game that I rented, and I remember renting it multiple times and getting to the same spot, the same boss battle against some, I don't know, goblin king or troll pirate, I don't know, some enemy that you wouldn't think would be that hard, but it was actually a really tough battle, and just hitting that same spot every time I rented it, not being able to progress, having to take the game back. By the time I had enough money from allowance to go rent it again, somebody had overwritten my save. Of course, the Blockbuster days. You olds like me remember that. Those dark times, losing your save file. So I would play it again, and I would get to the same spot, and get stuck, have to take the game back, rinse, repeat. And, but I still really connected with the game. There was something about the characters and the music. I remember the music so vividly. To this day, I still get the Lufia theme song, like Lufia's theme, stuck in my head, and I'll play it on the piano. Or what, I love that song so much, and it's just stuck with me for all this time. Anyway, really enjoyed Lufia, despite the fact that I couldn't get anywhere with it. When Lufia 2 came out, I don't remember if I ever owned it, now that I think about it. I don't know if I owned it as a kid, but I definitely somehow was able to rent it enough and for an extended enough period of time that I was able to beat it. So I was able to complete Lufia 2, whether I owned it or just rented it, I did finish it as a kid. And Lufia 2 was the first game that really, how do I put it, really affected me on a deeper emotional level that really made me sad in a good way, right? Like from a, feeling sadness from a good piece of media, not triggering some horrible childhood memory or something like that. Like it genuinely filled me with emotion the way I don't think certainly any video game ever had, possibly any major piece of media had. So I'm gonna have to spoil a little bit of Lufia 2, the ending of Lufia 2. If you've played the beginning of Lufia 1, however, then you already know this, because Lufia 2 is a prequel, and it ends right where Lufia 1 begins. There's the slightest bit of overlap where at the beginning of Lufia 1, you play the very end of Lufia 2. The thing is, though, when you're playing Lufia 1, you see the events happen, but you don't know these characters. So they're just avatars to you. Like, they talk to each other, but you don't know their personalities. You know nothing about them except they're 4 heroes that are fighting some evil dudes. And, for the time, that was basically all you needed. But so anyway, Lufia 2 tells the story of those 4 heroes, right? It goes through an entire game's worth of progression, and relationships are formed, children are born, and like friendships. And it's just like you get their whole life story to that point. And then they hit you with that same ending. And they're like, they're not pulling the rug out from under you. If you played Lufia 1, which most people probably did if they're playing Lufia 2, they knew what was coming, right? Because the game doesn't hide that. It's the beginning of Lufia 1. You can't skip that if you wanted to. But even knowing it was coming, the game did such an effective job of building these relationships between the characters and making me, even as a kid, care about these characters so much that when I saw the tragedy that befalls some of them in the end of Lufia 2, it just hit me so hard. And I think back on that, and I don't feel bad thinking back on it. I don't feel sad thinking back on it. It was a really cool and kind of profound moment where I sort of unlocked this new possibility for what this type of entertainment could do and could be, right? There's people that, will argue that games should be fun. They're games, for crying out loud. They need to always be fun and make you feel good. And if they're not fun and don't make you feel good, then what's the point? Why would you play The Last of Us? It's a misery simulator. And I get that, but to me, it sounds like those people have not had one of these profound experiences with a game. Because once I had that experience, it just sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities of what this genre can do. Beyond just feeding you information statically as you sit there and watch a movie or a TV show or read a book, you can't influence the outcome in any way. And even in a typical JRPG where you're not really influencing the outcome of the story because you're on rails, but you are still an active participant in it, and you have so much more control over the moment to moment than you do in any other form of media, right? So anyway, all that to say, I had such a profound emotional experience with Lufia 2, and it showed me that games could do that. And I've been chasing that ever since. Like, I love games that do that to me, even if it makes me feel sad. Like, you know, typically people don't seek out sadness, but it's a different kind of sad, right? Like, for folks that like horror, for example, you know, other people look at people who like horror and they're like, why do you like getting scared? That's a bad thing. And it's like, I know it is, but like, there's something about that contained experience of this negative emotion that is enjoyable, that allows you to process real emotions, like external things, emotions about things outside of yourself, by consuming these sorts of media. Anyway, Lufia 2, it's great. We move on into the PlayStation era, and spoiler, that's where it stops. I've got 2 more games here, and the PlayStation era is where it caps off. Not that I haven't had meaningful experiences with games after the PlayStation era, but I don't want this video to be an hour long. I just want this to be a nice chat. Maybe I'll do another one of these with some later games down the road, but anyway. Next up, and I hate that I only have the greatest hits. I hate that. I know it shouldn't matter, but I hate it. Got Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1. Now, there's always going to be arguments between fans about which Final Fantasy is the best. Most olds, like me, would say 6, right, is the best. If you're old like me and you think Final Fantasy VI is the best, drop a comment and let me know. People that, a fair number of olds like me, and some folks that are a little bit younger, would say 7 is the best. Some other folks, regardless of age, would say that like 9 is the best. I'm not actually here to have that argument at all. Like, I did a video quite a while ago where I talked about I think it's my top 10 favorite Final Fantasies, so you can get a sense for where I'm at there. I think it may have come out before 16, so I don't know where I would slot. It changes all the time, doesn't matter. I'm not here to have that argument, actually. Like, 7 is a special game for me because of, I think, more of what it represents than even what it is as a game. So when Final Fantasy VII was coming out, I think a lot of kids, teenagers that were fans of Squaresoft's previous games assumed that the Final Fantasy series and other Squaresoft games would come out on the next Nintendo platform, because they'd always been on Nintendo platforms exclusively. You didn't see a Squaresoft game on a Sega Genesis. It wasn't happening. We were very wrong. Obviously, history shows that, oh yeah, the Nintendo kind of screwed it up pretty bad with the Nintendo 64. Sticking with the cartridge format, everybody wanted the cheap and spacious CDs, and I don't blame them. I understand it. So I missed out on the PlayStation in its early years. I did eventually get one, but that's not part of the story. However, I was probably the biggest Final Fantasy fan, maybe in the state of Illinois. I didn't know a lot of other JRPG fans as a kid. I may have been the biggest Final Fantasy fan in the world, for all I know. I don't know. I was a big Final Fantasy fan. I loved it. So when I saw that Final Fantasy VII was coming out on the PlayStation, I don't know. Devastated might be overselling it, but maybe not. I was pretty devastated. It was hard. I wrote letters, okay? I wish I had copies of these letters, man. I wrote letters to Squaresoft, like the company, handwritten letters that I mailed to them, and they sent me responses, asking them, would you please maybe please put Final Fantasy VII on Nintendo 64. Could you do me a favor? How hard can it be? And they sent me back very polite letters saying that, they didn't have any plans to do that. Probably wouldn't be feasible to do that. We're very sorry. We hope you enjoy Square Enix products, etc. It didn't get anywhere. Sorry, everybody. I did my best. Tried to get Squaresoft to put Final Fantasy VII on the Nintendo 64. Would have made my life a lot easier. Wasn't happening. However, I did learn that it was going to come out for the PC. Now, we did have a PC at home. It was capable of connecting to the internet, like it was very early days, I think, of the internet. Very, very early days. So we had, I think, Juno email. So it was not like a crappy old computer. It was pretty state-of-the-art for what the state-of-the-art was at the time. So I was like, okay, well, I can get this game, Final Fantasy VII, when it comes out on the PC. And that will be great because I really, really want to play this game. So I saved up my money and I bought Final Fantasy VII in its weird oblong, I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, weird box, bought Final Fantasy VII on the PC. And it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. And that's because while my computer was reasonably state-of-the-art, it was not very 3D capable, let's say. It was missing a robust video card because we didn't have any games at the time that would have needed that. I wanted to get, I forget what it was called, like I think it was by Sound Blaster, but it was a 3D card. I can't remember what it's called. If I can find it, I'll put it up somewhere. But I wanted to buy this video card because from what I was told, the game would run spectacularly on this card. The downside was that this card was like $250, and I was, a kid. So through a combination of saving and convincing my parents to assist me in this very big, very frivolous purchase, I was able to get my hands on this card, get it in the computer, and boy, oh boy, did that game hum. It just hummed with that card, and it was so good, and it was so much fun, and it didn't occur to me that for $250, I probably could have gotten a PlayStation and the game, or if not, pretty darn close. So that was kind of a whoopsie, but also I kind of had this, I had this idea in my head that the PlayStation was too adult, like it was too grown up, and my parents wouldn't let me have it because the games were not family friendly. Well, then I played Final Fantasy VII, and at the time, if my parents had seen some of the stuff in Final Fantasy VII, they would have lost their minds, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so Final Fantasy VII is important to me because just of all the effort it took to get my hands on it and be able to enjoy it. Like, this was a game that I was wholeheartedly excited for and willing to work so hard for and go the extra mile to be able to play. And yeah, it's just always had a special place in my heart because of how much I poured into getting it. All right, the last game on my list, 5 JRPGs that were particularly meaningful to me, is, of course, Xenogears by Tetsuya Takahashi. This was his first game. If you are a Switch player and a fan of the Xenoblade games, I'm sure you know this, but in case you don't, Xenogears is the origin of the Xeno series. Xenogears would then go on to inspire the Xenosaga games on the PlayStation 2 and finally Xenoblade. And who knows what comes next after the future connected Xenoblade DLC. We'll see if some of these things maybe start to coalesce a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much. But anyway, Xenogears. I saw an advertisement for Xenogears in a magazine, and I have that advertisement actually. I told my wife about it and just was gaga over this ad, and I told her how much it affected me as a kid. I saw this ad and I was like, I need this game. I don't know anything about this game really, but I need it. And I told her about this, and she found it. Somebody was selling it on eBay, and she found it and gave it to me as a present, and it was one of the coolest gifts I've ever gotten. Because I was like, what? You found a magazine ad from 1998? What? Anyway, stand tall and shake the heavens. It was just such a resonating phrase. And the picture of Faye and Veltal it's just so cool. And then I learned that it was by a lot of the people behind Chrono Trigger, which further blew my mind. I was like, okay, this has to happen. So this is when I finally got a PlayStation. This was a little bit later. I saved up my money and I purchased a PlayStation, and the very first game that I bought was Xenogears. And I don't know if you can, is this gonna show up? These yeah, you can kind of see it, the scratches and the cracks. And this is my original case. It's been through a lot. It's been through many moves back and forth across the country, home to home. It's my original copy, and it's stayed with me since the beginning, and I plan on never letting it go, because let me tell you what Xenogears did. Xenogears did multiple things for me. I do plan at some point to do sort of maybe a retrospective. I've started scripting it. It's just a big project. I want to do a retrospective on what Xenogears means to me. Just a quick Cliff Notes version of what that's going to be is it taught me that it's okay to question what I've been told, what I've just been told and not shown any evidence of. It's okay to question that and want to know more about it. And as somebody who was raised in a very strict religious home, at this point in my life, I wasn't living with my mom anymore. I was living with my dad. Very strict evangelical home. Questioning things was not, you didn't do that. You just didn't do that. That was sin. It was wrong to do that. And playing Xenogears on the sly, right? Like, they didn't know what this game was. They saw it was a game with a dude and a robot, and they're like, whatever. He's a kid. He likes robots. Whatever. The story presented in this game is one that's like, would have shocked them in terms of how it portrays just religion kind of in general and beliefs in a higher power more specifically. And I'm not saying all this to make a statement about what I do or don't believe about big picture, universal things like God or religion or whatever. That's not my point. My point is that I wasn't allowed to question that or even think about it too hard, because that could bring about doubt, and doubting was a sin, and you had to have faith. You couldn't disbelieve. You had to just believe. And yeah, so Xenogears really opened my eyes to the possibility of being able to think critically about what I've been taught. And it didn't just apply to a religious upbringing, just in general. It kind of gave me permission, sort of, to ask hard questions and to be blunt about it. Kind, but blunt. And get to the bottom of things that I don't fully understand. Because what Faye and his companions in the game go through, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but what they go through in the story of this game is all about kind of expanding their horizons beyond the limited world that's been put in front of them. Okay? So, anyway, Xenogears is probably the game that has had the biggest impact on my psychology, let's say, on my state of mind, on what I believe and how I believe in things. And I'm just so grateful that I played this game and have replayed it and replayed it and replayed it over the years. And I'm glad that the series is continuing, that Takahashi is able to continue exploring a lot of these same themes in new ways with new characters and new stories. It's just, it's invigorating every time I think about it. And every time I go back and examine the broader Xeno series and think deeply about it. It's just astonishing what particularly Xenogears has done for me. I love it. It's great. It's a great game. And if you're a Xenoblade fan and you don't mind some old school JRPG jank, you should definitely play Xenogears. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope, again, that you will let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear some games that, impacted you in some significant ways. Again, like I said, this isn't necessarily a list of favorite games, but just games that had some sort of profound impact on you in some way. I'd love to hear what your examples are down in the comments. Thank you, as always, for watching and subscribing and doing all that stuff. It really just feels so great, and I love interacting with you all. It's a blast, and I love it. Anyway, until next time.